Hey everybody, so the DM planned an encounter that accidentally TPK'd the entire party, so session's canceled. Welcome to another exciting, combative, social, and maybe exploratory session. God, that was terrible. Version of this podcast. I am your host, the man with the most, Percy Glaxon. What up? It's been a while since I've done one of these.
I'm just letting you struggle that.
Yeah,
I'm letting
just let me drown.
Just watching you flounder. Yeah. This is the epitome of holding a hand out to grab and just high fives.
High fiving, yeah, literally. But I'm here with my boys, Josh.
Welcome, comrades, to
and Isaiah's.
Soviet Russia.
Oh, you're done.
I'm never done.
Hello, I have a new knife.
Damn it. Yes, I was thinking, do you guys want to do a new thing I just invented in this where we all talk about a new like tabletop thing that we just recently discovered or have, like, Isaiah, you got a new kniff. What you talking about?
It has nothing to do with tabletop anything.
What do you mean? It can be used for so many things.
I will talk about my brand new M7 bayonet. I love this thing so much.
I feel like you shouldn't talk about this if you can't show it off.
All right, everybody
describe
look up the M7 bayonet. It's the bayonet they used on M16s on Vietnam, basically all the way up to like 97. This thing is awesome. If you watch Doro Hidoro, that's Kaimon's bayonets. I have one now, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Now, how would you question, Isaiah? How would you use this in a D&D encounter? Like, what would you use? You know, just let's say, I don't know, a bugbear just fucking jumped out of the trees trying to mug you. What would you do?
Okay, so you take it, right?
Okay.
You stick it on the end of your crossbow,
mm-hmm.
and you stick the bugbear, and then you realize, you think back into the deepest recesses of your mind of that one time in your tragic backstory that the blacksmith hit you really hard because you failed as an apprentice. So you get mad and you stick him again, and then you kind of go into a fugue state, and then you realize that you've stuck him 7 or 8 times, and his head is mostly pulp, and your party has sort of looked at you in horror, but they don't want to stop you because they don't want to be in the business end of it, so they just let you rock and do your thing until you leave the fugue state, and then you have to drink about it for the next, yes.
Good answer. Josh, what about you? What would you do with a bayonet? Bugbear jumps out of the woods.
I do not want to continue this conversation.
God, trying to do things, Josh. Trying to explore a little bit.
I don't like where
we're just gone. Deeply uncomfortable.
It's not so much uncomfortable. I just feel like this could get weirder at any moment. So it's probably better.
Exactly. Speaking of weird, today, so I had the brilliant idea. As I always do.
Matt, that wasn't even an attempt at a transition. You just said words.
Nope, I just grabbed you like the hook from a stage. It's like, anyways, moving on.
Please make whatever the fuck that was our YouTube short of the week.
Well, no, we can't just, I don't know, maybe we'll slap
we'll
just slap some reverb on it and call it a day.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about this for a couple
I told
days
you to
now.
stop thinking about me naked, Matt. It makes me uncomfortable.
No, but besides that, I was also thinking about just building encounters, and I actually had one of those moments where I realized I was making an encounter worse. What?
Huh?
Again, I was making an encounter worse, and when I immediately changed it, it actually made this session better for it. So today we all want to talk about, encounter making. Like, what do you, just first off, like I always do, because it annoys Josh, where do you guys generally get ideas for encounters? Like, where do they come from? And by encounters, like, I am talking, social, the 3 pillars here. We got social, combat, and exploration.
So tired of hearing people say that.
Why, Josh? It's the 3 pillars of playing.
Because it just doesn't.
It says it right.
Because it's one of those things where people have beat it into the ground to the point where it has no meaning anymore, and nobody even knows.
What do you mean?
Like, they're just
it means
saying
so
words.
Much. No,
it doesn't mean anything anymore. What was the question?
Isaiah, do you want to go first?
Sure. Are we gonna go round robin for each category? Or
we don't have to. Like, we can. Like,
that's too much work.
This is more free. Like you can't see it, but I'm doing the Squidward arm. Like Benji's like it's free form, man. It's whatever you want.
Doing
like,
ballet on the stage.
How do I used to come up with encounters? We talked about it last fucking time. We talked about encounters, which is like either you just steal from pop culture, right? You're like, oh, I see this cool thing, or I've heard this cool thing. Like for example, I was telling Josh this yesterday. I've been getting weirdly into SCPs because I've got nothing better to do to listen to at work. And I was like, oh, well, I was listening to scary stories first. And eventually this reached this logical end with SCPs and creepypastas. And there's a lot of them where I'm like, this would be a hilarious encounter for the party. Like going into a store that's endless and then being trapped there for like 2 sessions, 3 sessions, then coming out and it being like a year having passed and they just kind of look like they've just like escaped Alcatraz.
Oh my god.
Music, if I'm like playing a game and I hear like good music during a fight, like Dark Tide, I'll be like, oh, it'd be really cool. My players fought like a horde. Or if it's like really dramatic music, it's like, oh, like what if a character, like what if a beloved NPC dies? How would the players like react to that? And I'll sort of build like who's there and what goes on and like the character's last words and stuff like that. And if it's more of like a social encounter, it's probably very, very weirdly like somewhat related to a conversation I've had in the last week or so that I've like retooled the hot beats of the conversation to sort of fit whatever they're doing if they need to have like a big political discussion, let's say. And I'll just sort of like retool the points that I feel like were hits in like my opinions on it. And not that I will like automatically put my opinions into what the NPC thinks, but like if I have a NPC who's like really crazy about war and it's something about like I think I'm like these two sides should not have fought or been in a war together, then I'll sort of like come at it from that point of view. Or if I'm like I just want to lead really hard into being like gunny Sarge Hartman from Fullmetal Jacket, I'll just do that.
Nice. You're not the only. You're like another person I've because I've never gotten an idea for an encounter from like. Or actually, sorry, I should rephrase this. Have you ever listened to a song and been like, I'm gonna build an encounter specifically for this song?
Yes.
Or specifically around or like because of this song?
No, not at all.
100%.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah. But all right, Josh. What about you? What kind of where do your ideas come from? Where do you get your ideas, man? Where'd you get your inspiration from, bro?
As I've said many times, I hate these broad and general vague questions, so I'm gonna give you a broad, general, vague answer. Like, I don't know, video games, I guess.
Okay, all right, I'll take it.
I don't really have a better answer than that anyway, TBH.
No, I mean honestly, like
maybe books sometimes.
Yeah, books, movies, TV. Random ideas. I think it'd be funny.
I have a little bit more of like a centered focus, Josh. How much has actual Greek mythology gone into you building encounters for us in your game?
Yeah.
Oh, the encounters specifically?
Or like encounters or events, right? Because you brought up like the oracles, we've brought up the colossi, the titans, and like how much of that is like, oh, like have you been like, oh, like I wonder what my players would do in this tragedy or comedy?
I mean, are we including, like, I guess it depends if we're including everything, or, like, if we're talking, if we're including, I don't know, meeting an NPC or whatever, it's come up quite a few times in that regard, in terms of, I have an idea for introducing said character. It's easy, because Greek mythology has a lot of, a well-accepted canon. It's easy to reference a lot of characters from mythology, and players be like, I know who that is, even if they only know a little bit. You still know something, right? I say Zeus, you have a vague idea of like who Zeus is. So in that regard, I use it in the same way that if you're playing like a Star Wars game and you mention Luke Skywalker, players will be like, oh, I know who that is. Very similar tactic. In terms of like combat encounters, barely at all.
Yeah.
In terms of combat encounters, it's just like, I don't know. I have an idea for a type of fight, and like, I have an idea for fucking like a type of fight or an event or just a thing I want to do, and then I'm just looking at D&D monsters generally.
Seeing what fits best.
Yeah, I haven't tried to like push the I haven't tried to push any of the combat encounters to be sort of mythological references, other than the most recent run where you guys fought the Talos. Like
The literal Colossus of Rhodes.
yeah, that one's a pretty like obviously that one's a reference. But yeah, most of them I haven't really done that. I'm trying to think if there was any other one where I even bothered. No, I don't think so. But yeah, for like NPCs and shit, obviously I'm using a bunch of stuff. And the main thing is building the like background lore stuff. I try to give a mythological feel often. So like, you know, when Sam asked me, it was like, all right, what's the deal with beholders? I wasn't just like, beholders, weird monsters from a different dimension. I was like, no, there's this giant monster comprised entirely of eyeballs that some great hero slaughtered, and all the eyes fell to the ground and exploded and gained sentience and turned into creatures. Blah, blah. I gave it a very like weird, over the top mythological feel.
Nice.
That one, the inspiration came from the fucking giants in Greek mythology that came from Uranus's cock blood. Because that's a real thing.
Taking balls in Greek mythology.
No, literally my man's goes to bang Gaia, and Kronos surprise attacks him and cuts his dick off, and the blood falls to the earth.
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
But yeah, the blood make big monsters.
Yeah.
You know, why not?
Please, listeners, do not chop off pee-pee. Will not make monsters. I promise you.
No, you're not Uranus. You don't get to make big monsters. Unfortunately.
What the fuck?
Yeah, there's a lot of weird shit like that in mythology where like things that don't have any real logic but have a sort of like pseudo have like a pseudo fantastical logic to them.
Yeah.
What was the question? I don't even know anymore.
Just, where do your ideas for encounters? Which it seems like you more so use this for like, Greek mythology, like taking inspiration from that for your social encounters.
I mean, I refuse to call it that, but sure, yeah.
But which is going to lead into my next question of like, what type of encounters do you guys tend to lean more towards as a GM, like when you're making?
Well, I'm running 5e, so combat.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay.
It's a 5e game. Combat.
Yeah.
It's going to be combat.
No, I mean, yeah, with 5e, it does seem that combat seems to, at least it takes the most amount of time to like prep and like think about, and then sometimes you have to do math. I
mean, it's the thing I pay the most attention to just by nature of the game I'm currently playing, but when I'm playing other games, that's not the case. But also other games, this is the thing about the term encounters. This is like a D&D specific thing. Like other games do not use this terminology, encounters. People don't think about things as encounters in other games. Like that is a very D&D specific thing. Like,
okay, so like
obviously the idea of encounters, like the statement itself, the word is very broad. So obviously the idea exists in other games, but it is not part of the lexicon of other games in the way that it is in D&D. And I find that very strange, and I don't really know where that comes from.
All right, so then like in like another game, let's say, what would you quantify as a encounter, a mini thing, whether it's fighting something, talking to something, or exploring an area? What would that be called? Because you can't call it an adventure, because an adventure is like a whole big like. There
isn't a word for it. That's what I mean. Like it's not this idea of quantifying like, oh, a specific interaction is an encounter. Like no other games talk like that. That's like a D&D thing. That's what I mean. Like there is no word for it. You just, my players met this NPC. My players had this fight or whatever.
Wouldn't a scene kind of count towards that? Like a scene where a scene would be mostly social or environmental, but you can have a scene be combat.
Actually, no. Yeah, you're right. That is a term that is more broadly used to scenes. A lot of games do use scene, but scene encompasses everything. Like a scene. Again, none of this is actually in the rule. Like, well, not none, but very little of this is actually in the rule books, which is why it's kind of weird, like philosophy talk to even talk about it. But like, if you were to have in a D&D game, a scene might involve a player might refer to a scene as a social encounter and a combat encounter in a scene. Whereas other games will just talk about the scene as a whole, and it may include multiple things, but they're not going to break down the individual little encounter bits.
Right.
Because most games don't care about that. And I think the only reason 5e does is because of the idea of making quote unquote balanced combat encounters. I think that's the only reason that is like a term in D. It's not just D&D, like Pathfinder also kind of uses that terminology. So like D&D adjacent.
Right.
But yeah, most other games don't think about like there's so many games out there that don't even have initiative or like there is no combat mode to most other not most, but like a lot of other games do not have like a combat mode that you go into, right? When you're playing D&D, when you get into combat, you're kind of playing, you go into like Final Fantasy activating combat mode, right? Like you go into a slightly different version of the game when you're doing that. Other games don't do that, right? Like if you're getting into a fight in Apocalypse World, you're not playing the game any differently. You're playing the game exactly as you would if you were having a conversation. It's just the types of moves you are making are different. Everyone take a shot.
Oh. I don't know. What about you, Isaiah? Do you also have like an issue with the 3-pillar word, or don't like the idea of encounters?
I'm gonna be real. I don't, because I just don't think about it.
That's kind of what I mean. Yeah, I don't really think about it. It feels like a not useful metric or a not useful terminology.
I don't feel like I've put enough introspection on it to say if it's worth, like, what it's actually worth. For me, I just go off of what my party responds to. So, like, you know, going into the game, 3 out of the 6 players were not fans of combat when I was a player with them. So I was like, okay, well, I like combat a lot, but I don't expect my players to like combat a lot. So I'm going to just set the game up to where a lot of the situations, if they are combat, they can be done quickly, which thankfully, as I've said 8 million times, take a shot every time Isaiah says Hellscape's about big damage. Pretty conducive to that, you know what I mean? When everything dies quick. Combats don't usually last that long. They do, because players, you know. I think a lot of my players are, when they come into my game, it doesn't matter how long they've played it, they're in like standard 5e mode. So I'm like, okay, like, you know, when I say stuff like, what spells do you, like, what gambits do you have? And they're like, wait, I don't have it, I'm a fight. Oh no, what I do have those. So I planned a lot of social stuff, like I planned a lot of role play based encounters, and I try to do my best to make as many maybe not as many checks, but as like anytime something important is happening, I will sort of think about how they're doing it in role play and what boons and detriments that they would get based on that. So I would probably say, in terms of order, just based on how we've been this far in the game, mostly social, close second being combat, and then the third one.
Exploration. Yeah.
I mean, right now they're doing a lot of exploration because that's literally the name of the game. Like they have to go find.
You're traveling through your Borderlands.
Hold on.
Borderlands.
They do a lot of traveling, so maybe it's a little closer than I thought. Like the combat, social, and exploration.
Because it's like that with a lot of games. Like I'm just generalizing 5e because that's where my brain goes to, and that's the main game I play. But generally, when you talk to people, most people, they focus on either social encounters or combat encounters, and exploration's always the weakest pillar, which sucks because there have been good instances in 5e of exploration, like Tomb of Annihilations, or recently the new Dragonlance books has a really cool section of exploring like, the sunken ruins and shit. And it's like, oh, that's awesome.
As we're sitting here though, and I'm thinking about it, that's because a quote unquote exploration counter is like almost not a thing, right? Because you use Tomb of Annihilation as an example, but the way Tomb of Annihilation works is you go from hex to hex to hex, and then something happens in the hex, but the thing that happens in the hex is going to either be a social encounter or a combat encounter. Like,
Well, no, because some of them are like you find a ruin or something. Like
that's not
some
an
of them.
encounter, though.
What do you mean?
It's not really an encounter. Like, just finding a thing isn't really an encounter.
Well, no, it's you find a ruin of some sort. Your players go searching for it, and it could either lead to a combat encounter or it could lead to them finding
just purely,
information or ruin. You know, it's
purely happening upon something though is not encountering anything because there's nothing. Because the word encounter implies two parties interacting.
Yeah, the party is you are exploring an area and you find the thing in the area.
That's not an encounter by definition.
No, I'm with Matt on this one. I would call that an encounter.
Because an encounter, like the word encounter, there has to be two groups.
There are the environment.
The environment's not a person.
And the players. Yes, it is. The environment is the person. That's the thing.
But it's not.
You're encountering. What do you mean it's not?
It's not a person.
It's the thing your players are encountering and you're meeting with.
If we're going to be annoying, technically an encounter does not have to be with someone. It can be with something.
Yeah.
But you're not encountering something either.
Yes, you are. You are encountering a ruin.
A place. How's a place not a... What?
I don't...
I is confused by your confusion.
Yeah, the definition, an unexpected or casual meeting with someone or something. But like...
Something?
Yeah, something. So let's say you're exploring, like, again, Tomb of Annihilation. You're exploring a jungle and you find this stone, like, gateway.
I don't know. I mean, I guess you could call it that. I don't think about it that way though. That's the encounter isn't there's a ruin. The encounter is the shit in there. Like I don't think about like, oh, we found an old building. I don't think about that as an encounter. I just think about you found an old building.
Sure, but in that case, if there's nothing in the building but a treasure chest, the encounter is still the exploration.
Yeah, but like, is that even worth quantifying?
Yeah, I think so. Depending on what you get. Yeah.
No. Like, there's no that is such a like. Yeah, you're getting something, but the process is such a menial, like, small thing that I don't feel like slapping the word encounter and like giving it a definition and explanation is like just feels like an unnecessary label. Like, we found a thing, but you don't need to.
Well, it's also the example I'm using. Oh, no, go for it.
Let me put it this way. In The Hobbit, when the dwarves like stumble upon the troll cave, they find the legendary swords that they take with them through the entire series.
Sure, but
I'd say it's a pretty big encounter.
No, you're misunderstanding my point. I'm not saying it's what occurs is insignificant. I'm saying giving it a label doesn't do anything. There's no point in giving it a label. It doesn't get us anywhere.
Well, I think it does. I think it actually gets us closer to what the Wizards like expected when they said 7 encounters a day. And I know people say like they meant combat.
They meant combat. They meant combat. It is in the section of combat. They're talking about combat. They say the word combat encounters. That section is combat. They are talking about combat. Everyone wants to be like, oh, they meant social and exploit. They didn't. That whole section is about combat. They use the word combat encounter. But I'm not even going to get into that one right now because that's a whole other... That's a separate can.
That'll be next week's topic.
All I'm saying is, I mean, really, this goes back to my statement of I don't think there's any value in this, like, in this lexicon being used in the first place. It doesn't do anything for us.
I feel bad because this, like, for me as a DM, like, this stuff helps me. It helps me run games better.
Okay.
Like, so that's why it's like
how okay, let's say the terminology wasn't there.
Okay.
How would that restrict you?
Because I don't know exactly. Like, all right, so your players are going to go into a fight. Okay, with what? It's like, all right, your players are going to talk to NPC. Okay,
it's a fight. It's a conversation. Like, you don't need to have a special word for. You don't need a special label for it.
But it helps. It helps break it down. It helps you get all your. It's like what do you call it? A mind map. You have the word exploration, and you have a bunch of these other lines that connect to other words that can be in there, like exploring, ruins, fucking, finding treasure, you're trapped, maybe a dungeon.
But Matt, you just said that whole thing and didn't use the word encounter the entire time.
No, but I'm saying using the word encounter, putting the word to it helps us get other connections to other ideas and ways to run the game. It helps us run the game better.
Is there any difference between
It could be named
combat's
anything. It could be named like
and then there's going to be
like,
a social encounter versus there's going to be a fight, and then there's going to be a conversation, and then there's going to be a ruins.
Well, you're still putting words to it.
Yeah, words.
Like, it's a weird like thing.
No. You're putting words to it. Yes. I'm talking about the idea of having to label it as if it's a mechanic. I don't think there's any point in doing that. I don't think it gets us anywhere.
It helps with like the mind mapping. It helps with creating the scenario for your players.
Well, so I think that the important thing to say is it might not help you, Josh, but it does seem to help Matt.
But nothing. Okay, but how does that help you, Matt? Like, nothing you've said is like how.
Well, I can see what he's saying. It helps him organize his thoughts in the way he should build each session. I get that's pretty simple as far as I'm concerned.
I need Sam here to like get my nonsense. But thank you, Isaiah. That was pretty good.
Like, the word encounter as a label doesn't like you could do the exact same thing without it. There's nothing special about this term encounter.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it's special. I'm just saying it just helps. Like Isaiah said, it helps me organize.
That's what I'm getting at. Is people latch onto it. Like people weight this term really heavily in D&D
because it helps them.
But it's not actually. It's like a weird. It's a fucking weird placebo. It's not really even a thing. Like if we're talking, 4th edition had encounter powers, right? So when you're doing something like that, where you have a very specific like mechanical things that the characters can do tied to this specific like chunk of time, really an encounter is like a pseudo measurement of time. When you're dealing with that, then yes, the terminology has a value to it. But 5e doesn't do that, and most games don't do that. And in fact, that was actually a complaint a lot of people said about 4e because that felt video gamey. So this weird. People like really love this label, and I don't feel like it's getting us anywhere. In fact, I honestly feel like if it wasn't used, people might be a little more free thinking and not restrict themselves.
How so?
I feel like people like. Oh, this is really hard to articulate.
Yeah, because that's why I'm confused. I want to understand. Like I want to listen. I want to understand, but I'm like it's a very easy concept to grasp.
It's because
it helps a lot of people, and DMs run it runs games better by having these 3 words.
It's because
to define encounters.
It's like a. It's a thing we all when we all say the word, we all know what it means, but like the actual specific definition is incredibly vague on it.
Right. So and then go for it.
Yeah. Well, because if we're talking about a video game, right? If we're not talking D&D, right? The thing about D&D is it's the game is run by a person. The person can react on the fly and quickly make decisions in a way that a computer cannot. So if we're talking about a video game, the term encounter is useful not for you as the human, but for the computer to quantify things, right? So if you're playing a video game and in that game, let's say you're playing an RPG or whatever, and you can rest every 10 encounters. The game needs to understand what does and does not count as an encounter in order to make that mechanic function. So in that video game, they might consider talking to an NPC is not an encounter and fighting something is, so you have to go through 10 fights. In a different game, they might say talking to an NPC does count as an encounter, so if you talk to 5 NPCs and then get into 5 fights, then you can rest. So in that regard, that all makes sense because that's very like, you have to have the label. There's a term for this in programming that I'm wishing Sam was here because he would know what I'm talking about. But there's a term in programming where you attach is it just a tag? Maybe the word's tag. Maybe they just call it a label. I might be overthinking it. They might just call it a label. But like there's a thing you do in programming where you sort of attach a little tag to the end of the line of code to be like, this is this type of code. You like put in a little box for the computer to understand, like this is X type of thing. But a human doesn't need any of that.
I think you're thinking about a statement. I think it's called a state. I did coding for a while. Like you're thinking of something called a statement.
No, it's not a statement. This is a word Sam has used a bunch of times too. This bugs me. He's talked about it before because it always comes up with 14 because weird coding stuff in 14.
You can always message him real quick.
It doesn't matter. But the point is like the computer requires labels on specific things to make sense of them because it's a dumb rock that we fire electricity into to make it think. Human beings do not require this because we're a fleshy rock that we fire electricity into to think, right? Or Mother Nature fires electricity into us, I should say. We can adjudicate on the fly. So a DM, you might say to a DM, can we rest? And the DM says, we have to do 3 encounters first. And then the players do a fight, get into 2 fights, and then they like solve a puzzle in the dungeon. And then one of the players might be like, does that puzzle count as an encounter? And then the DM will be like, yeah, sure, we can make it count. In that regard, the term encounter can be useful because you're quantifying a mechanical thing to it, which is, X number of encounters, then you guys can rest. And that's why I was saying with 4E, it was more useful because it's like, DM, does this thing we're doing count as an encounter? Do I get my encounter powers back? That kind of shit makes sense. 5e doesn't have any of that, but we're still latched onto the term, and people will design something like, people will be like, oh, I want this thing to happen into my game. Oh, but I need to make sure it fits into one of the 3 pillars. And it's like, well, you don't actually, because there's nothing in the game that says you have to. But people glom onto this encounter terminology in such a fashion that they sort of, whether they're conscious of it or not, I think kind of restricts themselves. Like,
well, it's like they know the
rules. Is this a
that
social encounter or is this a X? It's like, it doesn't matter. Just do the thing you want to do. Just do the scene.
Well, you do the thing you want to do in the game, so you're like, all right, social encounter. But what if this is the thing of like, here are the rules. Now I can bend them and do my own thing or warp them into, or I can just ignore them.
But you slapping the encounter label on that doesn't change anything mechanically. You're going to use the rules the same way, regardless of what word you slap on it. Right? Like, you're not going to run it like, if you didn't put the word encounter, you're not going to suddenly run it differently.
No, I don't think you are, but I feel like I'm a good case study of this. I've literally never thought about it in terms of social combat or exploration encounters. And you're right, it is something that you just do naturally.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think it's the system's fault that people glom onto it too hard. I think people.
No, I'm not saying it's the system's fault. I'm not sure where it comes from 100%. It's like a weird cultural thing.
It is. So with that in mind, though, I don't think people misinterpreting what it's supposed to mean is a reason to throw it out, because I think that's what people are doing, right? They're like, okay, everything I have to do has to fit into these 3 categories. No, it doesn't. They're just the 3 biggest categories, probably by far, right? Like, and you don't have to call them encounter. You can call them a scene, a situation, whatever you want to call it. Combat, talking, or finding shit. That's really what the game's about.
Yes.
Any RPG really that's like, fantasy adjacent, that's not, something like Monster Hearts.
But right. Everything that's within the D&D-esque style of game.
So, and while I would agree that I don't think we're necessarily gaining anything by having these 3 terms, we're certainly not losing anything either. Like, having a way of like codifying a situation, even if it's ultimately not necessary, it can still be helpful.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying, is I do think we're losing something.
I don't know what we would be losing if people do it with like a steady hand and an understanding of that they don't need to do this.
Well, because what I think has what I see is people have gotten really, really married to the term and give it too much emphasis and weight, even though it doesn't actually have any mechanics tied to it. Right? There's nothing in 5e, unless there's some really obscure rule I'm not aware of, but as far as I'm aware, there's nothing in 5e that specifically says you have to do X number of encounters to do Y thing or anything like that, right? There's no mechanic that specifically relies on the term. So by adhering to the term too much, people get lost in the weeds. And then they get lost in the weeds and they argue past each other. And then you have this situation where one person's like, no, the encounter section in the book is about all 3 versions of encounters. And then someone else says, no, the encounter section of the book is only about combat and blah, blah, blah. And really, you're getting lost in the weeds, because what that conversation is actually about is the level scaling and resource management of the game. But that's not what anyone's talking about, because everyone's really focused on this word encounter. Like, that's what I think is happening, is people are it's getting all this attention when it's not really the thing that we need to be like focusing on if we're talking about like ways that the game needs adjusting or fixing or looking at or whatever, or even running. Like people get, like when you get what's the little too much, you're not seeing the forest for the trees scenario. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I don't think I agree with it, but I do understand what you're talking about.
I've seen people do it is the thing. Like I've seen people like argue about like the weird minutia of like encounters when really the problem they are having is not actually that.
I'm sure you have. Like I said, I freely admit it probably is an issue that people are having, but I think I don't think we should throw the concept out because people are glomming onto it too hard. I just think we need to teach people a level of like steady-handedness when they're approaching these things.
Well, the only reason I say throw it out is because I don't feel like we're really benefiting from it, so there's no reason to keep it around.
I get that. I disagree there. I do think we are getting something. I think, and I'm the main proponent for just codify shit. Like, we have a way of labeling it, and we might not need it, but like Matt said, he finds it helpful. If I thought about it for more than 30 seconds, I probably would find it pretty helpful too, to just be like, okay, well, I want a good balance of exploration, combat, and social dynamics. And then you go, okay, well, I did this, why, and this. This was a combat. We fought something. We did do a lot of talking to people in 3 or 4 separate locations. We haven't done any exploring. Let's see if I can find a balance to that. Or you could go, well, I want these 2 things, but I don't want this one. So it can help you think about it in that way.
Nothing you just said requires the label of encounter. You didn't use the word encounter once. Again. Like nothing you're saying requires that label.
No, I use social, exploratory.
I did use the word encounter several times.
Didn't hear. No, you said I want to do whatever. Point being, nothing in that statement requires the label of encounter. Like you don't need to slap that label on there. It doesn't. You can or you can. It doesn't change it. Doesn't do anything.
So I think we're arguing about 2 separate things.
No.
I think we are.
No, I don't think.
Because you're saying we don't need it. And I'm saying, I agree, we don't need it, but that doesn't mean it isn't helpful. So as long as it is helpful, I don't see a reason to throw it away.
Well, I'm saying it's not helpful if you can explain the entire thing you just explained without ever needing to slap it on there. So it's not helpful.
You can, but it can make it simpler to do it that way. Just because something...
How is it any simpler to just use the word? Like, you're just replacing a word. Like, how is that any simpler? It doesn't do anything for us.
Because it's sort of, in my opinion, it sort of perfectly encapsulates what, like, a quick or potentially, like, any decent amount of time. I think an encounter, perfectly describes what that is. In my opinion, at least.
Sure, in a very broad sense of, like, just the English lexicon. Like, if you're talking about just English and what the word encounter means, yeah, it is a brief moment of time where a thing happens. Sure. As a word
for
as a word in English, like, yes. As a game mechanic, no. That's what I'm saying.
So it might not be for you, but that doesn't mean it's not for anybody else. I don't know. I can't rephrase it any other way. Well, you're stating it from your point of view, which I get. It's fair. You know, you don't find it helpful for you. That's fine. But like,
I'm not talking about just me.
Well, you have to be though, because Matt very specifically said he finds it useful. I said if I thought about it, I'd probably find it useful. You both are like, oh, I find it useful, but none of the examples that both of you just gave me were predicated on the use of the term. Like nothing you were talking about was like predicated on that being a requirement. Was it not? I mean,
I thought we were.
This is what makes me think we're talking about 2 separate things.
Yeah, because I'm getting lost now.
All right, whatever, Matt. Continue.
Sure. But anyways, so what do you guys think about like improving specifically like the example I was talking about earlier is in certain segments where you improve like combat encounters. Like one of the things, and I watched is a video that just came out with the guy DM Lair, really helpful DM tips, quick little videos.
Can't
And he
stand
recently
him.
did. I know. He has a very abrasive personality, but he's really good. It's like what if like Matt Colville was a bit more aggressive? Like, ooh, I like this guy.
I don't think I've actually watched this guy before.
Yeah,
I
and
don't know. He
like,
comes off a little too
aggressive. He's in your face about it, and he jokingly has the grognard thing where it's like these are the rules and that's how it is. But in reality, his main shtick is like, I'm trying to make dungeon mastering as easy as possible. And it's like, if you don't want to listen to me, then that's fine. But I'm just saying, it'll make your life better. It'll make your life so much easier.
His horse feels a little too tall sometimes.
Oh yeah, I've literally never heard of this guy before.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't.
Although I'm not super big on D&D YouTube.
I was gonna say, yeah, I follow a lot of D&D YouTubers and stuff. So he's like in that sphere, and he's really only come up in the last couple of years. But he's, again, another DM help tip channel. I find his resources very, very helpful for me. And recently, one of the things, and this is where it made my recent encounter with my players, where they're in a snow area, they enter a cave, and I had this whole encounter plan where they're gonna fight this snow hag and her ice golem creature, and then forgetting the fact that hags are very social creatures. They're willing to have a conversation with you. My immediately thought when I made the encounter was, they're just gonna fight. There's gonna be she's a magic ice witch lady. It's gonna be a really cool fight, and then the golem's gonna fight, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be big fight, real cool. And then thinking about it, it's like, no, wait, hags are a thing. Always, if a creature, and this is something he said in the video, if a creature is somewhat intelligent, don't just have it like the two sides, the players and the monster side, just all out slugfest. Sometimes it can happen. But if a creature has some sort of intelligence, you can always open the combat encounter with a social encounter, with dialogue, having the creature turn around and be like, what are you doing here? Like if they run into an ogre is pretty, big and dumb, but they can still talk to it. They can still try and either trick it into letting them into the lair, or, try and lie and be like, oh yeah, some guy's trying to, rob your cave, dude. We saw him escape. Like, you always kind of implement that. It's yeah.
No, I agree. I feel like the art of a talkative villain is sort of lost nowadays. And I'm guilty of this too. I was literally listening over our last counter episode, and how the rebellion, the NPC Josh wanted to do his big bad guy speech, and I was like, nope, fuck it, and I wanted to kill him. Looking back, yeah, it's probably a little fucked up of me. Do I regret it? No, admittedly,
yeah.
But I do now that I've looked back. I want to know what he would have said.
Yeah. Well, that's always a big thing that's happened to DMs throughout time, where basically now most people just have the bad guy speech happen as the players are going to the boss room. Just have it oh, he's speaking in your mind, or his words are echoing throughout the hallway, or some shit. It's like do the speech, then when they get into the room, they fight him, because your players are always gonna be like, I fireball him mid monologue.
Yeah,
This gonna do it.
I feel like something that I feel like people should try more is they're like, okay, I shoot an arrow, and the GM and they're like, as you ready your arrow, the evil lich goes, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
They're actually just wait, just can you let me fucking speak for 2 seconds? Look, I'm down to fight. Let me just look. I worked real hard on this bad guy speech. Let me just have the speech.
We just have
Let
the
me
moment.
just talk for 5 fucking minutes. I've been alone for 200 fucking years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is the first conversation I've had with a living thing in a millennia. Please.
Are you implying
Let me cherish the moment.
Wrote down his bad guy speech in his journal?
Yes, yeah, 100%.
Hundreds of years of planning speech classes.
Fucking guess.
Are you telling me that a Sararak wouldn't have written down his bad guy speech because he thought he was so fucking magnificent that he should put it to paper?
He makes dungeons just specifically to torture adventurers.
True,
of course he's going to make a speech.
He's such a fucking shitlord. He definitely wrote it down.
Maybe.
He Rosetta Stoned it too, just to make sure.
Yeah, just in case. He's like, hold on, I cast tongues on myself. There, now you all understand. You better fucking understand. I even learned sign language for the one deaf player. And then the deaf player, like, you know, writes in shock, be like, he doesn't have his hand on his staff. I cast fireball. He's like, fuck.
Oh my god.
I would argue.
Could you imagine he's like, do you know how hard it is to learn sign language when I have no one to practice against? Yeah, I can do it with the skeletons, but they don't know sign language.
They're also, you know, brain dead.
I officially love this weird creation we made.
I would like
He's
to,
just like trying to practice, and it's just like, boss, I don't have eyes. Like, fuck. I didn't think about that.
I like the mental idea of not a Sararak casting tongues, but he actually sticks a tongue in his mouth that has the spell tongues on it.
Oh.
Nice.
Just puts it in his skull.
Just gotta change his tongue real quick. He's like, hold on.
Yeah. Oh god, it just reminds. So I watch Critical Role Campaign 3 cut pretty on and off, but the biggest joke that Sam Riegel's robot character has an organic tongue is so fucking gross. And he's like, yeah, it's the flesh tongue. It's canon. And they're like, no, no, the fuck it isn't. Fuck you.
One day I'll sit down and watch Campaign 3, maybe.
I actually like, if you said you weren't a huge fan of Campaign 2, you'll love Campaign 3. It's very evocative of Campaign 1.
Yeah, it does seem a lot goofier from the few clips I've seen.
It is, 100%.
Campaign 2, super serious. Everything's serious, guys, except for Jester.
I mean,
like, thank you. It's like, thank you, Lord.
I think a better way to describe it, it's almost Tarantino-esque, where at times it is super dark, super serious, really compelling, but it's always funny in a dark kind of way. You know?
Yeah. I mean, not the whole campaign was, devolved of any kind of like hilarity or fun, but like it definitely, like I made the joke with you. It's like, don't ask me about my tragic backstory. Like literally every fucking character.
True. I agree with that. The part that I disagree with is when they run back and say, no, wait, let me actually tell you about my backstory. Because it seems like literally every character in Campaign 2 is like, no, I literally just told you, don't ask.
Why are we going down the Critical Role tunnel right now?
I don't know.
What is happening?
I don't know.
How did we even get here?
Yeah,
it's a bad episode. That's how we got here.
Yeah, true. But yeah, no, that is a big thing too with like bosses, like having the boss make a speech or having the boss like we met Strahd and talked to Strahd and had dinner with Strahd. That whole like part could have just turned out to be like, all right, after dinner, I'm going to kill you now. I just wanted to feed you guys, let you know what my plan is. That could have happened. Yeah, it could have been poison. Yeah, so much shit could have happened. Like in the dinner with Strahd, or like if you do something like that with a bad guy in your games. Like, all right, I'm going to have the villain just show up and talk to the players, or invite them to dinner, or maybe take them out to a tavern, or just I don't know, anything. Like, hey, you guys want to go ride? I have a death dragon. Let's go ride on my death dragon while I tell you how I'm going to murder you later if you fucking mess with my plans.
I did. So I had I sort of employed a similar tactic because I've spoken about him before, like the big angry, like humanoid alligator character in my setting, Gariel. When he first rocked up, like they were like, oh, we should kill him. And I was like, okay, well, I have to make sure that they don't think about that. That's not their first option. So I as they were driving in, they got like their convoy got pulled over. They got pulled out, stripped of their weapons, blindfolded, brought up to the penthouse. There's 30 dudes around them. The character that brought them up there had pulled the pin on a grenade, but kept the latch held so it wouldn't detonate. And he just walked around with them on the way up to the penthouse, just to be like, go ahead, try something. I'll kill everybody in this room. Yeah.
Jesus.
yeah, they hate that. His name is Graves. This is like his last name. And they like the second time they met him, they're like, Graves, do you have a grenade? And he was like, no, we're friends now. You killed my boss. It's fine. And then he actually
the Heath Ledger Joker like opens jacket full of grenades.
Yeah, pretty much. He was like, yeah, he was like chatting shit with them, but then they got up to the penthouse of the other person who he now works for, and he dropped a grenade in a steel box, and it's like they had them in the military. They're like anti-detonation. You like drop them in like a basically a safe, and you lock it so that it blows up, but it doesn't kill anybody. And he threw it in there, and they locked it, and they were like, Graves, I thought you said you didn't have a grenade, and he went, yeah, bad habits die hard, and they were like, oh, you.
Jesus.
But yeah, you sort of you don't want them to feel like, oh, we can't win, but you're just trying to explain to them like there is a time and a place to fight where he will 1v1 you, but this is not it. This is so he can do his bad guy thing. Come back later, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's definitely like a thing you can do. I wouldn't be mad at someone for doing that.
Oh, that'd be funny. I don't know, Josh, what about you? You've had, because I know you've had what was the tiefling guy's name?
Rebellion.
Rebellion. I know you've had him kind of like talk with Sam privately, like his character.
Well, they were
like
trapped in a different
like
dimension together for a while and had to survive with each other to get out. So, you know, he didn't really have a choice.
Right. That must have been fun.
It was a time.
For Leah, yes. For Rebellion, no.
No, Rebellion had a horrible time.
Was it one of those things where they were like, or were they equally in like power, so they couldn't kill each other, but they're like, well, we got to survive this together, you know?
Pretty much.
That, and if one of them died, it would like change the space-time continuum.
Also that.
Even worse.
Yeah. When they were like, oh yeah, if you die, it rewrites reality. Everyone went, oh okay.
Yeah.
Pulls dagger away that I was going to use to stab the guy. Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Edge.
What the hell were you asking me?
Mostly just better ways to improve on, combat encounters. Like, and this is the thing that because you brought up, you thought originally I was talking about the Matt Colville video about alternate objectives, when originally my thing was designing non-combat solutions, combat encounters.
Well, that's essentially what he was talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I've tried that multiple times. Hasn't worked at all.
No.
yeah.
So, I'll let you know. I'll get back to you on that one.
We jumped the gun a little bit.
It's never worked for me. I mean, in terms of like making combat encounters more fun, I don't know. Like, there's the obvious ones, environment, but also just like enemy variety is another one, and just like move enemies around. Again, these are all these are all like D&D specific problems. Most other games is like not even a thought or a concern because combat just flows a lot easier. So I don't have to really. Also, because combat is not like this is its own topic now that I'm thinking about it. But in D&D, you have the rest of the game and the combat game, and they're kind of two separate games. In a lot of other tabletop, because that is not the case, you don't. That like pause you have when you would like, all right, everyone roll for initiative, and we're doing the combat mode now thing. Because other games don't have that, it's really easy to just flow from like tension to like shit's happening to like. It's like that scene in the movie where it's like there's a talk, the bad guy's talking, fucking Daredevil's shit talking Wilson Fisk, and then they throw a couple of punches, and then they pause and they have like some conversation about it or what. It's a lot easier to do that in a lot of other games. So I don't have this concern as much in anything but D&D. In other games, I kind of just run it like movie scenes. Whereas in D&D, you have to kind of obey the board game aspect, because that's what everyone's agreed to play. And hypothetically, if everyone's agreed to play D&D, they are intrigued by the board gamey fighty part.
Yeah.
Although not always, I suppose, because
if you do theater to the mind, like you remove the board.
It's not even.
I mean, you still have initiative and everything, but you remove the board out of there.
It's not even just
all
that.
Using your imagination.
It's just a lot of people sign up for D&D not knowing what D&D. A lot of people sign up for the game. Oh God, how do I even say this sentence without it sounding really dumb? A lot of people sign up for the idea of D&D, not the game of D&D, but because D&D is a hobby, like this is so hard to illustrate. Hold on, brain worky. You know that thing where when people are like, oh, what are you guys doing tonight? Oh, we're gonna play D&D, and actually you're playing fucking masks, but you just say you're playing D&D because tabletop and D&D have become synonymous terms. You know that thing? You know the problem I'm talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
No,
think about. Okay, Matt.
I know, I understand. I just haven't heard that because most people, they either
No. Like,
they'll say I'm playing D&D or I'm playing a board game or I'm playing like
right, but that's the problem, right? Because D&D is the most popular thing in the hobby. Even though you're going to your friend's house to play Dungeon World, you're just gonna say to your mom that you're playing D&D because she knows the term D&D. She doesn't know what the term tabletop game means. So, you not get what I mean?
No, I said I understood. I just said I don't think that happens as often as you think.
Oh no, it happens a lot.
This is where I gotta agree with Josh. No, I think that is pretty common.
It's amazing. It is such a big thing that there was not a tabletop category on Twitch. There was only a D&D category for a long time. Because the two are so synonymous with each other. It's like the thing when your grandma says, "Are you playing the Nintendo?" and you're playing Halo.
Oh, you mean my mom when I'm playing any video game?
Yes, everything is Nintendo. D&D tabletop has the same problem. All tabletop games are D&D. So,
are you playing Halo? No, ma, it's Skyrim.
Right.
Completely different things.
So God, now you should be thinking of John Halo. Fuck.
John Halo.
Jimmy Rings. So,
oh my God, Jimmy Rings.
So the reason I was bringing that up is because a lot of people actually want to play tabletop. They don't actually want to play D&D, but D&D is the only thing they know because the two terms have become so synonymous with each other. So a lot of people sign up to play D&D and like actually they probably don't want to play a tactical board game, but they don't know that tabletop is a genre with more games than just D&D in it. So they end up playing the board game battle simulator, and then they're like, "Oh, wasn't really on board with this." Anyway, like I said, that's kind of a different topic. So, whatever. We have a friend who this happened to. But anyway.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
How did I get here?
The non-combat solutions, specifically after I
have an easier I have an easier time implementing those in other games.
Okay.
Yeah. To wrap it back around.
Yeah, for me, I think the non-combat thing, it's very party dependent. I have admitted I enjoy combat. I enjoy violence. Yeah. If there's an option I can solve with violence, I will probably try to do it with violence as a knee-jerk. And then if I thought about it for more than 30 seconds, I'd probably say non-violence is the best way of doing it, but I like violence. My party tries to solve basically everything non-violently. Just straight everything. Cool. They've tried talking down the big bad of the game thus far. The only times that they haven't tried not doing non-violence is when they don't get the chance, right? Like when the giant teleporting Godzilla-like T-Rex kicked the door like Kool-Aid Man into the fucking forest around them. They're like, oh, and then it, swallowed somebody, and then they're like, oh, okay, so definitely off the table. Gotcha.
That is kind of interesting though for a post-apocalyptic game for them to not be so gun-ho about fighting. So that's actually that's interesting. It's different.
It is. It's great because I think the reason why is because I very much stressed to them when the game started that this isn't a post-apocalypse, it's a post-apocalypse. So the world has already ended. Now is like they've been through the worst of it, now at the other end. Now is the rebuild. Which is why when there was an uprising of a few hundred bandits, that was like the craziest thing because not only are they getting organized, the enemies are getting organized. And like now it's not like, oh, we need to learn how to feed ourselves. It's like, okay, well, we have to produce enough food for the people a few miles away so we get their gas, Yeah. So I think because of that, they think of a lot of things as like how can we do this diplomatically, which is great.
Right.
I love that they do that. There are some instances where they can't just because, not everybody is you can't talk down everyone. Some people are just fucking crazy.
At some point, do you just like flat out eventually, like as they're trying to talk to someone and be like, guys, it's not going to work? Like above game, like you just be like, guys, above game, it's not working. It's not going to work.
I don't, because as much as they try to do it non-violently, but they're pretty good at being like, shit hit the fan. All right, cool. Locked and loaded. Let's go, baby. They my players all attended the school of talk shit get hit. So they're like, hey man, look, we can come to a conclusion. And they're like, yo, fuck you. And they're like, all right,
Shame.
fuck around, and find out. Let's go. All right, you want to let's play this song. You know, Brett's character locking his M1 Garand. You know. So yeah, you know, they're pretty good about being like, hey, let's have a talk. And then when the talk fails, they're like, it's Warrior of Light tries to defeat the Asians with the power of friendship. That failing, he defeats them with the power of incredible violence. It's literally that.
I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna ever say to my players, oh, you can't convince this person. If it gets to that point, the enemy is just gonna pull a weapon out and be like, all right, square up. Like, there's no point in me going over the player's head. Like, there's no point in me, or not the players. There's no point in me going over the character's head at that point and saying something. You just have the characters in character be like, no, we're done talking. I'm gonna kill you now.
Right. Yeah.
And then if they're trying to talk to them while he's beating them in the face with a hammer, I mean, he's not gonna stop beating you in the face with a hammer, but you could try, bud.
True. Although I often also have the opposite, right? Like if the enemy in question gets clowned in the first round and a half, they'll often be like, let's reconsider. Let's just
yeah. That was something I was gonna say. Like the enemy's actually like surrendering is another. That's another good point of like if you're dealing with, you know, some sort of, you know, somewhat intelligent creature. You're fighting like you're fighting a goblin, and after you fucking break its shin, it could be like, oh god, please wait. All right, let's trade. I surrender. I give up. Don't kill me.
Yeah.
Let me go back into the woods, fix my leg, try again next time.
Often when I do like bandits, like if you think like the Borderlands psycho bandits, those guys in my setting, well, they don't talk. They'll be killed to the last man and still keep screaming. But like if they're more organized and they get scattered, like there's one encounter I had, and I try to do this as much as possible with the more intelligent enemies, but my players just flattened several vehicles with their fancy new anti-tank rifle. Yeah, they just ripped like a pickup truck, a few sedans, just blew them to pieces. And like I was like, okay, yeah, the bandits just start driving off because nobody wants that. Whatever smoke you've got, they're not about it, so they're just gonna go home.
The rest of the bandit squad just sees like a mushroom cloud in distance. They're like, nope, Delta Squad's dead. Roll out.
Yeah,
turn around. Fucking.
I mean, I don't tend to have the enemies surrender too often because, well, my players are fighting a lot of angry, violent monsters and interdimensional demons and such. But also a lot, I don't know. The surrendering thing can also be super annoying if you like overuse it too, because a lot of the time if the players are like getting into combat, they probably want to, you know, eat their ass.
They want to commit acts of incredible violence.
Yeah, I mean, most groups I've been in, that's been the case. I've never really ran for a group where they're like, no, hugs everyone.
Yeah, in Storm King's Thunder, we had a really bad reputation of like try and save one person alive, interrogate them, and then let them go. We had a bad habit of doing that for almost every fucking encounter. To the DM's like, all right, fine, fuck you guys. Dragons, you're not gonna interrogate a dragon. What are you gonna do? It's a dragon. And it's like, ah, shit, he's right.
At which point they went, joke's on you, kiddo. Interrogates the dragon.
Yeah, it's like you just I'm gonna cut off your tail.
You just lock it down with a bunch of immovable rods, and then you watch slowly as you burn the dragon's like painting collection.
Oh, it took me thousands of years to get that.
Oh, relax, guy.
Yeah, just hit him with the trays in the infinite. Hit them where it hurts. And their stuff.
Money.
Yeah.
Their stuff.
Are you gonna really hold on to this broken grand clock? I'm still using that. It's broken.
I'm still using it.
I can fix it one day.
Fucking dragons is weird. Like
hoarders.
Not like treasure hoarders, actual just hoarders.
I do like that too in like my favorite book of all time. They specifically talk about like
Matt,
the random what?
You just spurred on that so hard that your mic cut you off.
Good. Sorry, OBS will pick it up.
What the hell were you trying to say there?
I was saying Fizzbin's really fast, but also I was moving my head like to and then from the microphone really fast. So I'm like zooming like.
That was not the fucking word. It's not at all what I thought. I don't even know what I thought you just said. Went. Yeah, I thought you just sneezed or something. Yeah.
I was like, did Matt just have a seizure?
So confused.
But no, they actually have in Fizzbands, they have like a bunch of shit that like is in other Dragon Hordes, which is cool. It's like I don't know, like a bunch of war maps or paintings, grandfather clocks that don't work. Yeah, like random junk. You can just throw in there. It's like, does this worth anything, DM? Nah, you just find it. Why? Because I wanted you to. Bye.
That's how you get scenarios where Isaiah steals weird Mexican sugar skulls we found in the dungeon.
Nice.
Remember, it was a dude's skull. It was actually the skull of a man. He painted to look like a sugar skull.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
But actually, shit, I was gonna say with the because I forgot to say earlier with the hag fight, what I ended up doing was, besides fighting, I actually looked up in the DMG, you know, a thing that nobody fucking reads ever.
I use it for fire kindling.
Yeah. The social interaction shit. I ended up putting in like, all right, if combat happens, you know, combat happens. But if the players are able to, they might be able to persuade the hag from surrendering and not, you know, actually just dissolve combat altogether, like not even have a combat encounter. And to my players' credit, they fucking did it. They talked to the hag, they found out her deal.
But Matt, can I fuck the hag?
I mean, sure, if you really want to. I don't know if any of my players are going to. They basically like, she was like, you know, crazy hag living out middle of the cave. They're like, come, like you need some help. Come back to the school. We'll get you the right, you know, the physical therapy, the mental, you know, therapy you need. Like we're gonna help you out. We feel bad for you.
You're not unconvincing me.
But no, they managed to do it, and again, they all rolled really well on all the, you know, because in the social interaction thing, it says, you know, it's a bunch of charisma checks, depending, and then the DC changes as the character changes their, you know, if they're hostile, neutral, or, you know.
Matt, I thought you didn't like those rules.
No. I like those rules if they're in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I don't like them that the players can just do that to everything. That's a good thing for DMs to gauge how to interact with and how players and DMs can interact with NPCs. But if a player goes around, it's like, hey, I want to make this person friendly with me, DM. The Lich? Yeah. I want to make. I use the interaction. I don't even remember. Influence. What is the rule called? I use the influence action on the Lich. The Lich casts Death Ray on you. No, but DM, I rolled a 21. He's got to be friends with me now. That's the rules. It's not mind control. He's friends with me now. All right, hold on. The Lich casts Meteor on you.
I think you're misinterpreting a little bit how that rule is intended, but okay.
Well, because again, I don't think that the influence action needs to be a thing. There's a lot of negatives.
But it is a thing in the DMG right now.
It's a thing in the DMG, but it's not a thing that like the DM goes, all right, players, you're interacting with the fucking your NPC. Now do this thing or else you fail. It's gauging how to learn how to role play as a DM, so that way you can make those on the fly decisions and be like, all right, well, this player just insulted a person, so they're probably not going to help him out. Or it's like, oh, the players are actually trying to help this person, or they're trying to talk to this person, or they're trying to trade with them. And it's a good way of like having that social interaction and learning as a DM how to, you know, not deal with it. That's not the right word, but how to, what's the right, fuck, my brain not working properly. I guess how to deal, not how to deal with them is not the right term, but how to handle those social interactions where you're not sure how the players or how the NPC will react to the players and what they do.
I think you're giving that one little influence action a lot of weight.
I mean, look it up, man. There's a ton of videos on people poo-pooing on it.
I mean,
mostly a lot of DMs, because it's one of the things from 4E that a lot of people complained about, that
I know
players taking the reins from the DM a lot of the times, and the DM just sits there for 15 minutes while the player's like, all right, then this thing happens, and this activates this other power, which activates this other power, which activates my action, which activates my bonus action, and the
I
DM
think-
just sitting here going, like, guys, can I play? I would like to play the game.
I think that one little influence action that was in the fucking one D&D playtest, people are acting like it's so drastically different from the thing that's in the DMG, and I don't really feel like it's that different. It's just a rewording of what was already in the DMG mostly.
I don't remember this being in the DMG. That being said,
It is.
I think basically like everyone, my memory of the DMG is spotty, inconsistent, and often filled with white spots.
It's in there. It's just not called the influence action. They don't call it an action. It's just like a suggestion on how you could potentially run social encounters.
It's the section. It's in chapter 8 of the DMG. It's literally called social interactions.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to the wording that was on that influence action thing. They just reworded something that was already there and put it in what will potentially be the player's handbook in the future.
Right.
I don't think it's whatever. I don't know. People are giving it a lot of attention. I think it's going to get mostly ignored anyway. It's kind of whatever.
No, because they changed it from the first pass to the second pass, and they clarified some things because a lot of people.
No, I'm saying players will ignore it. Like, I don't think anyone's really
players will ignore it.
Do anything with it. Like
players,
both players and GMs. I don't think anyone's really going to do anything with it. I think people
I'm already seeing a lot of not grognards, but fucking mid-maxing munchkins on DMs being like, I can't wait to fucking influence everything.
Yeah, but
you can true. Though it is worth saying, there are like a lot of things that how do I want building the game with min-maxers in mind. I feel like is dangerous, and you see that happen a lot with fighting games. Wow, take a shot because Isaiah's talking about fighting games, right? Like,
no, it's only a shot. It's only a shot if I do it.
Oh, fair enough. All right. Well, so like, a lot of people in the competitive scene say don't build, or sorry, a lot of people who aren't in the competitive scene say don't build fighting games based on competitive play. And why, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I just know that it is said, but there is I can sort of extrapolate, huh?
I can go into it.
I mean, you might as well. You help me here.
I'll let you finish what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I don't know the exact reasons because I don't watch fighting games competitively, but I understand the idea, right? Like, you don't want to build a rule set based on the smallest percentile of people, because you're not really catering to anyone in particular other than the fringe of the fringe group.
Right.
So I think
what Matt's saying is that the influence action is sort of catering to the fringe. Sort of.
I don't think it is personally. I don't think it is either. It's I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get players more familiar with things that aren't attack, persuade, perceive, and investigate.
Yes.
Like, I've got players who've been playing for literally years. None of them really use the ready action beside Brett and sometimes LP. They just don't use it.
But yeah.
But it's a very useful tool to have in your toolkit. So I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to persuade people to look at things outside of the, I don't know, I try something, right? If you give them tools to use, it should make their lives easier.
Yes. So there's a couple of things that are all interacting, sort of in tandem with one another here. In reference to what you're saying before about the fighting game thing, basically what people are saying is you shouldn't design fighting games for competitive players. Fighting games should have a lower barrier to entry because if you design them for the heavily competitive players, a lot of the cool shit that people want to do, they just won't be able to do. And then the casuals will bounce off because they won't even be able to do anything cool looking, and doing cool looking combos and shit is basically what casuals want to do in fighting games. So that's kind of where that mentality comes from. And D&D, you can kind of apply the similar logic, which is to say you don't want to cater to the min-maxy people, because if you cater to the min-maxy people too much, then what happens is the people who don't want to min-max are going to be sort of missing part of the game or not getting part of the game because they're choosing not to do that. And so they're sort of missing out on some, or they're not able to make their character as cool or effective as they would like to be, so on and so forth. But yes, the influence action scenario, what it is because D&D is a mechanics first tabletop game, Right. In comparison, you basically have two major styles of design when it comes to how you're handling the mechanics of your game. You can design your game to be fictions first or mechanics first. You design your game to be fiction first. That means the character must justify in the fiction of the game what they are doing to get the mechanical benefit afterward. So for an example, in Apocalypse World, if you have an ability that says you get +1 forward, which is to say you get a +1 to your next roll, you don't just get to say, I give my companion +1 forward. You have to say to the DM, I would like to help out. Oh, actually, sorry. Here, let me rephrase it. Let's use the help action, because that's actually a thing in both games. I forget what Apocalypse World calls it. It might assist or something like that. In Apocalypse World, you don't get to just say, I'm helping my friend. You have to say to the GM how you're helping them, and then describe what you do in order to do that. Oh, help or interfere with someone. That's what I was thinking of. You have to say what you're doing in order to activate the help move, and then once you roll, you get the mechanical benefit. In D&D, you don't have to describe how you're helping, rules as written. You just have to say, I would like to use the help action on my teammate, right? So D&D is mechanics first, Apocalypse World is fiction first. Because D&D is mechanics first, you end up in a scenario where when people get into combat, they say, all right, I can do X thing, I can do Y thing, I can do Z thing, I can do some combination of the three, I have this ability that activates on this turn, blah, blah, blah. Everything's very solid and straightforward. When you're not in a combat encounter, if you're talking, as we've been talking about, social encounters, those mechanics are not there. There's nothing that says in D&D, you can roll a persuasion to do X thing to the NPC during the social encounter, right? Like there's no there's no spiritual weapon in a social encounter. You can't summon an ally to give you a bonus to your persuasion checks during this social combat, right? Like that's not a thing. The influence action is kind of a way to bridge that gap a little bit and push players into that train of thought in that, hey, players, you can use your mechanical abilities in social encounters too. And by creating the influence action, they're trying to kind of push people to think about it that way, because that's always been a thing, right? Like if you have an ability that is beneficial in some kind of social encounter, in fact, a lot of abilities have particularly nowadays with newer subclasses, a subclass ability will have kind of a combat component and a social component, right? You can use that ability the same as you would in combat, right? Like just because you're not in combat, there is technically still a sort of bonus action economy underneath the whole time you're playing. It's just when you're in a conversation and you're not in combat, you're not tracking it as granularly as you are in combat, right? Things kind of slow down to a very granular pace when you're in combat. But that action economy is technically, if you think about it in this is getting real sort of game designy, the action economy is still going on the entire time you're in a social encounter. It's just you're not paying attention to it quite as close as a combat encounter. So the influence action is kind of a way of the devs to be like, hey, you can do actions in a social encounter. You can do things that aren't just a persuasion check, right? Like there are things you can do. So I think Isaiah's right in that they're trying to encourage people to do more stuff outside of just combat scenarios. However, Matt is right in that some people are going to look at that and think what that means is I get to tell the GM what to do because I activate my super influence power. I don't think that's what they intend it to be, though.
I don't think
the problem is.
No, I don't think it's what they intended to be, but it can be, and
it totally can be. Yes.
The example I say about 4E, I literally heard a lot of people from reading on a couple of forums and Reddit and people who played in 4E being like, this is literally what happened to me in 4E, and it made me want to stop DMing.
Yes, because the problem is people look at that influence action and they want to treat it the same as like a subclass ability. Like, I activate the thing and I do the thing because the game says so and the GM can't tell me no. But that's not really what the point is. The point is supposed to sort of encourage a different kind of thinking, because the way people think, a lot of players think about it right now is, not all players, but a lot of players, is, oh, when I'm in combat, I have like actions and bonus actions and specific things I can do. When I'm in a social encounter, I don't know, we're just kind of rolling around on the fly. But you're not actually, right? Like, you're not really supposed to. You are supposed to still do mechanical interactions when you're in like a quote unquote social encounter. It's just a different set of interactions. And a lot of people boil it down to a persuasion check. Done. All of this that I'm talking about is why Burning Wheel has an entire social combat mechanic to do this. And it's literally its own like sub mechanical system for when you're having like a really intense debate or like a really important conversation. But you could put that in D&D.
You could.
It requires some work.
I do think that the big thing here, right, is like a lot of the influence actions perpetrated on what a lot of the game is based on, which is like beating a DC, right? Like,
yes.
The thing that they've literally said in all of the one D&D things is there are instances where no matter how good their checks could be, no matter how hard they game something, they can't do it, right? Like, so I think that is their way of being like, you know, don't worry, if you pay attention, you won't get caught in this trap, because you can just say no, right? Like, you're not saying no in the no, you can't do that, but you just tell them like, it doesn't matter what you roll, this is above DC 30, it is not possible, I'm sorry, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
part of this problem is also the non-granularness of checks in D&D, in that you either beat it or you don't. That also feeds into the problem. So the influence action is trying to have like granular levels of success, but the rest of the game doesn't have granular levels of success, so you get kind of in a funky design space. Which I think they should put granular levels of success in D&D, but that's a topic.
Well, I guess you mean more than just like DC 10, DC 15.
No. I'm talking about
it's like failing forward and
no. I'm not talking about failing forward. No.
Granular levels. Successes, sorry.
Huh?
Like degrees of success and failure.
Degrees of success. Yeah. What I'm talking about is if the DC, and a lot of people will do this in their games on their own, but the rules as written don't support this. But what I'm talking about is like, if the DC's 15 and the player rolls a 10, you go, okay, I'm not going to give you everything, but I'm going to give you some success because you got close.
Yeah.
Right. Because
that's good. Yeah.
In Apocalypse World, you always have a 10 plus on a 2d6 roll is a success, but a 7 to 9 is a success with a cost. So if we're talking in D&D terms, all right, I'm climbing up the mountain. All right, make an athletics check. The DC's 15. The player rolls a 12. The DM will say, all right, you get up the mountain, but you drop your 2 potions as you're climbing up. So, like, you still get what you want, but there's a consequence or a drawback involved. Right. If you were to do that in like a social context, you might say, all right, I try and, I plead with the guard to try and let us into the city. DC's a 15, you roll a 12. All right, the guard lets you into the city, but he's going to assign one of his buddies to keep an eye on you the whole time you're here. So it's like you get what you want, but there's like a granular success. The influence action kind of has that built into it, in that like you can kind of move that like I don't remember what they called, the like attitude slider thing.
Yeah, that's in same with they're friendly, hostile.
Yeah,
or
that
neutral.
You can kind of move that slider up and down, so it's sort of a partial success system, but also kind of not.
Yeah, and it's weird because in Xanathar's Guide they have that, but the opposite, where it's like there's success and then there's bigger success. whenever it comes to like the downtime rules.
Oh yeah, you can do it that way too.
Which is weird. Yeah, which is weird because it's like you don't. It's like you know you failed, but I'll give you a little bit. No, it's either you met the DC or you overshot the DC, which means you double the reward.
Yeah, D&D does sometimes, rules as written, give you stuff for overshooting the DC. Sometimes, which is kind of a funky one. That, I mean, that only works if you have. The only reason that works is because D&D as a game has a wide, the potential set of numbers you can get, right? Because it's a D20 is very wide, so you can do that more. Whereas when you're talking, when you're only rolling 2d6, not as, it's a little, your number range is smaller, so that becomes a little trickier. The like idea of overshooting.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think now, like, because we've kind of been going all over the place with this. What do you guys think are we kind of mentioned earlier too, like cool ways to like mix up, I know Josh, you don't like the words, but like mixing up like a social encounter with a combat encounter or a combat encounter with an exploration encounter.
See, you're kind of exemplifying why I don't like the term, but we're not going to get back to it right now.
Well, like as an example, like let's say you're trying to get information out of a bad guy mid combat, and it's like, all right, I gotta beat this guy's ass, but I need him to say the thing that'll unlock the key to the vault, so I get the item. I need to beat him up just enough without killing him, so I can get the info. Or it's like you're fighting a monster in a room that's booby trapped, and none of the traps are like fighting the monsters. Like, I don't know, anything like come to mind that you guys have done or seen or were involved with. I kind of like do a really good job like mixing up combat encounters like that.
I'm trying. Okay.
Well, I think, I think the it's not one that I've done, but it like one that comes to mind. We actually talked about it on the last encounter episode. That was a suggestion we made to Josh with. For like a quick recap, he wanted my character and Rebellion, the big boss enemy, to have like a 1v1 fist fight.
Yeah.
But it kind of got muddled when other players sort of got into the mix. So the idea was like, oh, let Django and Rebellion do their fist fight, and then the other players could help, but like you could have the Dredge, the weird crazy sludge monsters in his setting, be killing civilians. So it's like, okay, either help Django or save civilians. Mm-hmm. And there's a cost there's a price to either side of that, right? Because either we kill Rebellion faster and maybe Django doesn't die, yay. A bunch of civilians die, we get reprimanded or potentially punished, no.
Right.
Or we save a bunch of the civilians, we get praised or rewarded, yay. Django maybe dies, no. Right? So like, that'd be a good way of sort of mixing those two things together.
Okay. Now, Josh, sorry, no, keep going. My bad.
I was gonna say exploration and combat. That happens more often than you think, right? That's literally you're as you travel like down the road, you see the dust cloud coming in from the distance. Oh no, it's actually bandits on on horses trying to destroy your caravan. Now you're like traveling, you fight the bandits, you go across the bridge collapses. Oh, now you're in the ravine / Atlantis area. If anyone watched 1000-something's Atlantis, way back to the way back. You know what I mean?
I like that movie.
Good movie. It's one of my favorite movies.
I am trying not go on a tirade about a previous point here. I mean, I don't know. I'm mixing them all the time. This is kind of what I'm saying about like I just throw the label out because it's not helpful to me. Like I'm mixing these things constantly, just naturally, because you're gonna, like even if you don't make some kind of conscious thought of like putting the term, I am combining a social encounter and a combat encounter. Like, no, sometimes you just like have a shit talk with the villain or like try to convince who you're fighting, like, hey, maybe we should stop. Like, you do that kind of stuff's going on constantly, which is why I don't even like bother to put any codification or name to it. It's just like sometimes you can reason with the person you're fighting, or like sometimes there's some sort of environmental objective that sort of shifts the target, or a lot of the time it's like after you beat the bad guy in question, you interrogate them later. I mean, that happened in my game pretty recently where like there was a dude who was possessed, more or less. They beat the shit out of him, threw him in jail. They later came back around and be like, "What's the deal, bud? How you feeling?" At which point he kind of told him to fuck off. I just designed the scene as it will be. I don't really think about it in like any special way. It's just like, do I want them to talk to this character? Yes, I do. Do I want them to eventually fight this character? Yeah, they'll probably fight him at some point. Are they going to explore deeper in the dungeon? Probably. Like I had a dungeon my players went into where they came across this big bone naga dude who a bunch of lizard folk are worshiping, thinking that he was some sort of water deity because he was using a decanter of endless water to make them believe he could like create water out of nothing. And players ran into him, had a little chat, and he was like, "Listen, I'll help you, but you gotta give me something in return." Players said, "Oh, okay," and trying to figure it out. Isaiah gave his little homunculus character as like collateral, knowing that later down the road he could just call him back. The Nagadu is like, "All right, whatever, I can help you now." Go in, that's sort of the social. They had the conversation with the guy in question. They go explore the dungeon a little bit more, get into the big boss fight. Afterward, guy fucks off and sort of betrays them. They come back, beat his ass. That is essentially covering all three of the pillars, if you will. But I didn't think about it in that way. I just was like, this is how I want the scene to go, more or less. Obviously, variation in what the players do and shit.
So let me put it to you this way then. Just let's try to reword Matt's question in a way that's a little more helpful to you. Do you have any like specific situations that were multifaceted and not just a punch fest or a go find the thing that you can think of?
I feel like I did answer Matt's question, did I not?
No, I know you did, but like, are there any like particular standout, like, because you listed some of them that you did, but like, are there any that stand at you as like particularly successful?
The one I just described,
the one with oh god, what was the line?
Lakoto.
Oh yes, actually, yeah, that's fair.
That's what I was talking about, the bone naga.
Yeah. All right, that's fair. Yeah,
that was mostly that one. I mean, the boss fight was still just like a slug out situation, but dealing with him specifically didn't necessarily have to be. Kind of at the end, it sort of ended up that way, but it didn't have to be that way. I mean, in terms of like completing an encounter that wasn't just defeat them or whatever. I mean, the Duragar situation, that was a like protect the Duragar type scenario.
Sure, yeah,
that was kind of that. I don't know. I haven't had a lot of success of like the idea of specifically having an alternate objective. I haven't pulled that off a lot, or well, at least not in my current campaign. So
I ended up using the article on D&D Beyond by James Hake, the monster weak point. I did that for the final boss of the 3-year campaign. It was pretty cool.
It's still just that. I mean, yeah, that's still just a slugfest, though, right? Like you're still just going for the kill.
Yeah, well, it was a fight, and then it turned into, okay, now we can't do damage to the monster because it's in super mode. We gotta search its body, find the weakness, with a bunch of different DC checks, and then we gotta try and hit the weak spot with disadvantage. And if we hit the weak spot, then the creature becomes vulnerable, and then we can actually do damage again, or mega damage.
Yeah, I mean that adds to the complexity of the fight itself. But I think Isaiah was asking like something where the goal is not just lower their health bar to 0.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any examples of that, Matt? Where the objective wasn't lower their health bar to 0?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Oh, I just remembered something. In Descent into Avernus, you guys.
Oh shit! Yeah, go for it.
Remember the portal we had to close?
Oh yeah.
We had to close the portal before, or to stop like the stream of
demon
minotaurs. I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Actually, no. Wait, I'm dumb. I just realized that the fucking ice hag encounter, the thing with the golem is, the golem was a pet of another student's, and they had to free it from the hag's control. But the hag had it under a specific spell, so the players had to fight it, weaken it, and then do a spell or reverse the spell in order to free it. So it was like, we have to get it to half health, and then we got fucking solve this weird hag spell in order to free it without killing it. Yeah. I don't know how that just like left. I was like, that literally is the last encounter.
We were literally talking about that not that long ago. Yeah,
I know. That's why I'm like,
you were mentioning that like an hour ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, I can't think of one. It's like, you mean the one that happened last week, dude? My brain. What time is it? Good question.
There's also there's something to be said. I haven't done this myself yet, but there's something to be said for the video game method of a boss fight that isn't really a boss fight so much as just like a big puzzle monster.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the dragon in Demon Souls.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bad example because that isn't a fun fight, but doing something like that,
the dragon god.
Yeah,
Rip.
but doing something like the dragon god fight in a D&D game or any sort of tabletop scenario, that can be fun. You know what I mean? Like essentially sort of solving the puzzle to stop the thing as opposed to just like clunking him on the head or punching him in the toesies.
I forgot if it's like one of the old drag. Oh no, go for it.
No, it's just the punch the big monster in the toesies until he dies is like one of my biggest peeves in gaming. Hate it so much.
I think in one of the old Dragonlance adventures, from like 2nd edition, they had a thing where it's basically a chase sequence and you have to run away from a dragon as it's chasing you through this dungeon. And it's basically like in The Hobbit, where they're like going through a bunch of different tunnels and shit, and your objective is basically to close the tunnel and basically just imprison the dragon so it can't escape the dungeon as it's chasing you throughout.
Incredibly difficult to run. I don't even know how I would go about that.
Yeah, I'm trying. This is like a general thing. I read it. I didn't read the rules because it's a 2nd edition rule, and I was like, I don't know if this is. So, but it was a thing in one of the adventures where it's like, all right, this dragon is chasing you guys throughout the tunnel. You can, there are 4 exits. You gotta, like, as it's chasing you throughout these exits, you gotta make sure that there's a cave in or something. You can try and trap the dragon in there. You could try and fight the dragon, but it's probably better that you run away and trap it in here. Otherwise, it will just melt you.
Yeah. I see the other problem though with those sorts of things where you give an alternate objective to the fight is because D&D is a combat game and Pathfinder is a combat game and a lot of White Wolf games are very combat heavy games, right? What ends up happening is you're like, all right, players, here's the fight and there's an alternative objective. And then what your players end up doing is going, oh, well, we're in a fight, so obviously the objective is get all the health bars to 0. And then you go, well, no, that's not the objective. Why do you all want to do this so badly? And they just bang their head against a wall and how they could possibly, and then they get mad because they're like, we can't possibly win this fight, GM. It's like, well, because the objective is not to just kill everything in the room. There's a different objective, but you all are too focused on getting the health bars to 0. It's like, because these games are so combat focused, everyone just focuses on the, like, how I do most damage and hurt big monster. I mean, I ran into that. I've run into that multiple times in my game, and I'm like, fuck, this is irritating.
Yeah. I think. Did you ever have that, like, where you try to introduce an NPC, but they're kind of scary to the players, and they end up thinking it's a combat encounter and just immediately attack?
Yes.
You guys ever run? Yeah.
Probably. I can't think of anything, but probably, yeah. I'm sure I have.
Yeah, because like in the 3-year game, I wanted to just scare my players, but not have them fight it. And I introduced when they were in the Underdark an Illithid Lich, which is a Mind Flayer Lich that just runs a magic shop.
Oh, I can give you
And the fucking paladin punched him in the face because he's like undead.
Yes.
And mind flare, double bad. And I'm like, I fucking guess. And they ended up killing him, but it nearly was a TPK.
Yeah, it's funny. Mine also involved mind flares. Isaiah, remember the mind flares in the ravine?
Yeah.
What a good monster.
Yeah. My players came across, there was like these 3 mind flares sort of moving through their pathway, and they were in the way, but the players had not, the mind flayers had not noticed them, but they were in their path. And my players were trying so hard to be like, how do we murderate them? And I'm like, guys, don't have to kill them. But my players were convinced murder was the only option.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing I've realized, and I hate this, I wish, if I come up with a better solution, I'll get back to you. But I think the thing I've realized is the only way to solve this problem is you just have to say it blunt.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant earlier with the above game talk.
Like, with the what?
Above game talk.
Yeah.
Players.
Yeah, well, specifically on like an encounter by encounter basis is what I'm talking about, because a lot of the time what you want to do is, you know, in your GM brain, you're like, all right, the players are going to get into a fight. They're going to realize that they cannot win the fight. And then so once they realize they can't win the fight, they're going to look for an alternate objective, because that's how it goes in video games, right? You're fighting the big monster boss and you're realizing you're not doing any damage. You go, okay, obviously I have to do something else before I can hurt the thing. But a lot of the time what ends up happening is players realize they can't win the fight, and then they just get mad or try to win harder instead of looking for an alternate objective. Yep. So what I've realized is you just have to say to them, hey, there's a different objective you need to try and do. Like, you just have to say it out of character, which I hate, because I want it to be organic. I want, in my heart of hearts, I want you as a player to realize, I want you to have that video game moment where it's like, oh, I was about to say, is that a spoiler? Yeah, that's a spoiler. Okay, I'm not gonna say that. I was about to mention a spoiler for God of War Ragnarok. I'm like, no, I won't say that. You know,
Kratos dies.
It's the League of Legends. What? It's the Legend of Zelda thing, right? Where you can't hurt the boss until you do something like, I got to throw the bomb in the spider's eyeball so he falls over so I can actually attack him or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. You want players to figure that out organically in the fight, because it's cool if they figure it out organically. They feel smart. You feel cool and smart for like designing the encounter well, but it just doesn't happen in a tabletop context.
I think if you I think you got to do something kind of like, and actually this is, Isaiah, I don't know if you'll agree with me with this. Like, you have to make the threat so visibly like scary, and that the players will look at it and be like, we can't deal with that.
I tried.
And well, no, I'm saying a good example I'll say is Critical Role, the Chroma Conclave. They swooped in 4 ancient dragons, blew up a city, and the players were fighting them as they ran, but they're like, yeah, we can't. All right. What level are they like 13 or some shit?
Actually,
right? Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But Josh, I think you did actually pull that off at some point.
When?
Fighting the Voidkin in the Monotide, when we had to break the barrier. Because I immediately was like, oh, we're not going to win this fight. We can't win this fight. We have to get out of here.
I think I did tell you guys.
I think I don't think you did. I think it was like I'm pretty sure it was after Brett had been like, do we have a chance of beating them? And I think watching me try to break down the barrier with the scythe and the monsters keep popping up, you were like, yeah, that's a safe opinion. That's like a safe assumption to make.
Yeah, I don't think that's bad. If you like, if your character is smart enough to realize.
I remember the fight. I don't remember exactly how it went down. So maybe that was the case. So here's what I'll say, Matt, in regards to the Chroma Conclave example. The problem was when the Chroma Conclave showed up, that wasn't a fight. That was a cinematic moment where the dragons swooped in and they started burning the city down, blah, 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 blah. Matt did not say roll initiative and then put all the Chroma Conclave tokens on the table, right? I'm generally talking about situations where initiative has been rolled and we are in fight mode.
Right. Well, I'm using that as an example because you can use an example like that as a combat where you see, a dragon shows up, is fucking up the city, and it's like the dragon just burned the building to the ground one breath. I don't think I have the AC of a house, guys. I'm not. I'm just saying.
Right, but it's not quite the same. But it's not the same because you as the GM, you were never gonna say, like Matt Mercer in that scene was never gonna say roll initiative. Right, he wasn't gonna have them roll initiative and then put the tokens on the board and be like, all right, now we're in fight mode, because that wasn't the point of the scene. It was more of like a cinematic vibe. Whereas I'm talking about initiative has been rolled, the fight has been engaged, we're in combat mode, but the point is not to just beat down the bag of hit points. There is a different objective.
Well, they have actually. So one example that I know of is they do this in Out of the Abyss, and spoilers have played Out of the Abyss.
Demogorgon,
there's a part where you're at the docks, and Demogorgon, the demon prince, just shows up rising out of the water, and there's a bunch of like I forgot what they're called, Darrow, like, and Snurfeblins and shit, and they're all like throwing javelins and shit at it as this thing is Godzilla walking its way through the docks, and the players are basically just like, well, I mean, we could try and help, but I mean, I don't want to fight that thing. It's got two heads. Look at this. Look at that thing. The fuck is that? I don't want to deal with that. So they run away. And so you got to make it a situation where the creature is so scary, or it's like, I think they even have a Demogorgon like shoots a laser beam out of its mouth or something.
The problem is, I think the big crux of the issue is when you roll that initiative.
Well, it was an initiative. That's the thing.
That's what I'm saying.
It was an initiative encounter. Yeah, it slows it down. It's going to slow the game down like a motherfucker.
No. What I'm saying is I'm talking about situations where you are rolling initiative, though.
Yeah. Like, well, that's what I'm using the Demogorgon example.
But you just said they didn't roll initiative for that.
No, I said they did.
Oh, they did.
I said they did roll.
Okay, I was also confused. I thought
He said didn't. He said didn't.
No,
right?
I said did. The Discord might have cut it out. I said did. They rolled initiative.
Did you hear that part, Isaiah, or am I crazy?
No, now I'm gaslighting myself. I don't know.
I don't know. All right, whatever. Yeah, so yes, that is a similar example. I tried to do that, and my players. The tornado shark situation. Remember that one, Isaiah?
Yeah.
I basically tried to do that. I basically tried to be like, it wasn't one big monster, but it was like, there's so many monsters you can't reasonably fight them. And my players just tried to fight them the whole time until I said, all right, guys, the point is to like get from point A to point B. Like I had to say it because they tried really hard to slam their heads against the wall.
Kind of. I still kind of, for me, that was still more of like confusion about the map than anything else. Like, because I was confused about the map, I wasn't really sure what to do other than fight, because I didn't think, based on what I saw on the map, that escape was an option.
Yeah, all right, I guess that was like a funkier scenario, but still a lot of it I felt like was you guys trying to be like, well, we could just kill them all, right? And I was trying to explain that you couldn't, and it didn't, Harpies was also a similar scenario where you were kind of like, well, what if we kill all the harpies? And I was kind of sitting there like, there's no way.
Yeah, I mean, the harpies, it was like if we get into a fight, what do we do?
Well, no, there was a point though where you were actively like considering like, all right, how do we engage them? You like went up the stairs and I had to say, guys, there's another staircase.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's the problem. That's what I mean is like, the only time I've ever really gotten that scenario to very clearly work has been to just say it out of character as like player to player or player to GMs. It's the only way. Like it seems to be just the best way to do it. If you want them to do another objective, you just kind of have to say it. You do the video game thing where the quest pops up on the screen and there's a sub objective.
Unfortunately, I think that is like the best method, though.
I know. I hate it. I want a better method, but yeah.
I mean, I'm honestly not sure. I feel like a lot of it does have to do with like how it's expressed. So like, if I could think of like one scenario where it was like combat was there, but it wasn't the objective. It was pretty early in my game. They were on like the giant like moving city thing. And they were like, okay, well, there's an army coming and no one here is a combatant except for us. And there's 6 of us and dozens, maybe 100 of them coming. So they were like, all right, well, we can fight them, but we can't fight them all. It's not possible. We got almost murked fighting 15 guys. So they were like, all right, we can hold them off though until reinforcements come. We just have to get the city running. We have to drive it through the valley pass and out, right? Like I didn't tell them like, you're never going to win this fight, but you sort of explained to them in character, like, we can't fight these numbers. We are going to die. And some of that, they might be like, nah, it's fine. But I guess I was kind of lucky in that sense of they had the not it's fine, and 2 of them almost died when they said fuck it, YOLO. Yeah. I don't think you have to make it clear about what the objective is. I think you just have to be very, very clear about what they're up against.
Well,
super on the nose.
I'm not necessarily saying you have to. You don't have to tell them the objective. But what I'm saying is, the only way it seems to work is to tell them that there is another objective. Right? Like you could definitely get away with not specifying what the other objective is. But it seems like most of the time the option is say, yes, there is indeed another objective.
Yeah, it's fair. Or you have to be. It's one of those those seeds that have to be sown very, very early on, like first few sessions. And I said, like, you have to sort of hit them with it at low level to be like, combat isn't always the answer. Hit them with that in session 1, and then sort of just every so often just sprinkle them in so the players can know that that's on the table and it's not something that's going to go away. And once they are like conscious and they're constantly thinking like, okay, how do we game our way out of it? I feel like they'll start doing it more often than not.
Yeah. Although then you're kind of banking a little bit on them like remembering that and putting that in the back of their head and hoping.
True. So at the beginning it's a little easier, right? Because they're like lower stakes.
Yeah, at the beginning it's easier.
And I think if you do it early enough, if you reinforce it well enough at early level, it does become one of those things where it's like, it's been like this from level 1 to 10. It's probably going to keep going like that,
Yeah, if you can, that can work if you present enough scenarios where other options are there or other objectives are there, and your players are playing what's the word? Like playing consciously enough, but like that's not the word I want. Like mindfully enough. Because if your players are trying to play just like, JRPG dungeon crawler, like if they're just trying to like crawl dungeon, smash monsters, then they're not thinking in that headspace. So assuming you can continue to do that consistently, which is to say, like, present fights where the objective isn't just lower every health bar to 0, and assuming your players are sort of playing mindfully enough to consider that on a consistent basis, then yes, you can do it without just saying it every time. But that does require that is 2 stipulations that have to go well for it to
true. That is true.
Stick.
I will give you that. I think there probably are ways to like ease it to like tools that you can give players that will make the situation a little easier, right? Like if the players ask you specifically, like, is there a way out of this that doesn't involve combat? Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like maybe make them roll for it. Or more often than I would just sort of be like, oh, I would say, oh, your passive insight tells you, just sort of help them game their own way out of it. At least give them the tools to get what they need.
If you just be like, you're a player, your character is intelligent enough to know that, and then
Yeah, if they're asking
Dot, dot, dot.
questions, sure. I'm willing to like tell them pretty much whatever they want within reason. If they're just sort of pondering, like if they're just probing questions, then yeah, sure, that's fine. The thing I'm trying to avoid is being the video game announcer where it's like, now you must capture the flag. You know, like I don't want to do that. That's the part that I'm trying to avoid. But you know, again, and also the other thing that's like the other thing too is sometimes that comes up is you'll have a miscommunication and players maybe don't even realize that there was a miscommunication. Like no one realizes there was a miscommunication. Everyone thinks they're on the same page, but everyone is not in fact on the same page. And then it just is like a whole other cluster, right? Like with the Talos fight, luckily with that one, it didn't end up being too big a deal. But there was a point in that fight where Isaiah was like, oh, I thought we had to like, I thought his head was hollow and you wanted us to climb in. And I was like, no, that is not what I was saying. But like, if you had not said that, I wouldn't have realized that that was even a miscommunication that was there. I thought you guys knew what I was talking about. So that's like a
little confused on that. A little bit.
That's like a whole other can of worms.
I did have a bunch of other little things like quest types and all that shit, but that could be another episode on its own. But I guess any final thoughts you guys have on like just counters in general, like any closing thoughts you wanna end off on?
Sister's a final thought. Oh, badang! Anyway, sorry, what?
Isaiah?
I know, you know what? I know the first person I'm using this bayonet on.
What do you mean?
That's fine. Don't worry about it.
Hey, at least I changed it up and didn't say your mom that time.
True. That's true.
I don't know why I decided to, but I did.
He's evolving.
I'm evolving. I just decided to change it up. I don't know.
Yeah. No, what were you saying?
Yeah, I would say. I think. I'm trying to articulate the thought.
There you're good.
I don't want to say you'll get what you'll get from it what you put into it, right? Like, think about things realistically, right? Like, if you think in a situation, not everything has to end in incredible violence, as fun as it is, right? There's often some solution there, no matter how strange or how little you can see it in the moment. If your players see it and they're striving for it, and it like you could see it potentially making logical sense, let them figure it out. Like, worst comes to worst, you're just gonna end in combat like you wanted anyway. But if they are like, no, we got this, then say fuck it, right? Like you know, the true arbiter of everything in these games are the dice. Let the dice decide, right? Fucking go for it.
Yeah. Josh, any closing thoughts?
I don't know. Don't be too beholden to this idea of the mighty encounter, I guess, is what all my ramblings come down to. To reopen that and sort of, I don't know. I'm trying not to bring the tirade back. Wow. Woo. Whole bunch of thoughts just blew into my brain at once and then flew away very quickly.
Yeah, it happens.
I guess I don't like. Yeah, think about the thing that you might often refer to as an encounter. Think about them a little more organically and open-ended, rather than having to fit into the quote-unquote 3 pillars or having to give them any kind of specific label. I guess that's the main thing I was getting at. I think.
I'm just gonna completely ignore that and then be like, yeah, mix up your encounters. Maybe incorporate 2 of the 3 pillars sometimes. You know.
All right, Matt. You know, I'm just gonna kick you in the balls, I guess.
Sometimes the social encounter can have some exploration in it. Sometimes exploration can have some combat.
I'll give you the bayonet next. Once I'm done stabbing you, I'll give you the bayonet. You can stab Matt.
And then I'll take the bayonet and I'll stab Josh.
So that's not how the circle jerk works. You got to stab me, and then I'm gonna stab Sam.
I don't have a reason to stab you.
I'll think of something. Don't worry.
Offended that you have a reason to murder me.
Yes. Yeah, this has been the Sessions Canceled podcast. Thank you guys. If you like this episode, give us a 5-star rating on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you listen to all your podcasts.
Matt, I'm just gonna write you a script for this.
No, I like this. Don't forget to subscribe on the YouTubes, hit that ding dong, and follow us on Twitters if you're still on there. I think a lot of people are leaving for some reason. I don't know why, but if you have the tweets, follow us.
Have the tweets.
Yeah, if you have the tweet.
If you have an angry blue bird that you hold in a cage in your household.
Yeah. Get that cage a good firm shaking. Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. This is this has been a episode. I'll just say that much.
An episode ever.